If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it out. We thought it was just a story, a campfire legend to scare people who wandered too far into the dark. But the Rake is real. It's out there, watching, waiting. And once it finds you, there's no escape. Every night it gets closer. I can feel it in the cold air, see it in the shifting shadows, hear it in the silence between my own breaths. This is only the beginning. And if you want to know what happens when the darkness finally catches up, subscribe to the Midnight Codex, follow the trail before it's too late. You can still hear it, can't you? The rules didn't keep it away, not in the woods, not in the empty house. I thought leaving would end it, but it followed me. It's here now, in the middle of the city. Last night I woke to a pair of white eyes staring at me from the corner of my own room. I don't know what it wants, or why it's watching. If you've ever seen something like this, anywhere, anytime, tell me in the comments. Maybe if we put the pieces together, we can understand what it really is. March 12th. Today was normal, or at least it tried to be. The city has a way of smothering strange thoughts under the weight of routine. The sound of traffic 5 stories below, the dull hum of the refrigerator, the blinking red light on the neighbor's balcony. I let all of it wash over me during the day, pretending last night was just another bad dream. School was long. First period was math, and I kept staring at the clock, watching the minute hand crawl. History group project after that, my partner kept scrolling on her phone instead of working. At lunch, I sat by the window and watched the rain smear the skyline into a gray watercolor. My legs still ached from track practice. By the time I got home, my head felt heavy, and I told myself I'd sleep early. Dinner was quiet. Mom kept glancing at me, her eyes searching, but she didn't ask. Dad came home later than usual. Their voices leaked through the wall, low and sharp, like knives being sharpened. Not shouting, but worse, that tense, coiled silence between sentences. I put on my headphones, turned the music up until it became just a solid wall of sound. When I finally went to my room, I left the blinds half open. I like the way the streetlight bleeds into the edges of the ceiling. It makes the shadows softer, safer. At least that's what I thought. The clock read 12:04 when I drifted off. I don't remember what I was dreaming, only that it ended abruptly. My eyes opened like someone had snapped their fingers right in front of my face. The room was still. My heart was already beating faster than it should. The first thing I noticed was the sound. A click, then another. Software almost hesitant. It reminded me of the old light switch in the hallway, the one that doesn't always catch on the first try. I held my breath without realizing it, listening. There was a third click, but it was fainter, like it came from across the room. I shifted my eyes, letting them adjust. My desk was a hunched shadow in the far corner. The chair, with yesterday's clothes piled on it, slouched against the wall. And beyond that, the darkest part of the room, the patch of bare wall where my Space Odyssey poster used to be before it tore. That's when I saw them. 2 small white dots, perfectly still, perfectly round. They weren't glowing, not like LEDs or streetlights. They were just white, against the kind of black that feels too deep to belong in a bedroom. I told myself it had to be a reflection, a trick of the light from the street lamp outside. But the blinds were half closed and the angle didn't make sense. I blinked. The dots stayed. It's hard to explain, but they didn't just look like eyes. They felt like eyes, focused, patient, aware. My skin prickled like it knew something my brain was still denying. I pushed myself up slowly, my blanket sliding off my shoulders. The air felt heavier, colder, as if it had shifted in the last few seconds. The city outside had gone quiet. No passing cars, no muffled music from the building across the street. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed muted, like the whole apartment was holding its breath. The dots stayed exactly where they were. I thought about grabbing my phone from the nightstand, but the idea of looking away for even a moment felt wrong. If I broke eye contact, something would happen, something I didn't want to see. Then I blinked, and they were gone. Not dimmed, not faded into the darkness, gone, like they'd never been there at all. I kept staring at that patch of wall, waiting for them to reappear. My heartbeat was loud in my ears. 1 minute passed, then 2. The corner remained empty. I told myself it had been nothing more than the streetlight catching on the edge of the desk, maybe a trick of my tired eyes. I lay back down, pulling the blanket over my head. The warmth was comforting, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying the shape of those dots. They weren't the flat, shapeless spots you get from staring too long at a screen. They had depth. They had weight. When I finally drifted off again, it was to the steady glow of the street lamp seeping through the blinds. I left the corner of my eye on that spot until sleep pulled me under. This morning, I almost convinced myself not to write this down. Almost. But I keep thinking about the way the air felt different after I saw them. Like the room wasn't mine anymore. Like I'd woken up somewhere else without moving at all. If it happens again, I'll keep the light on. As I close this entry, I notice something. On the edge of the page, right next to where I wrote the word eyes, there's a smudge. Dark, thin, not ink. It looks like the faint print of a fingertip rubbed in charcoal. I touch it, half expecting it to smear onto my skin. It doesn't. The city outside is loud again now. Car horns, brakes squealing, someone yelling 3 floors down. But it doesn't make me feel safer. I know I'll hear that click again. And when I do, I'm not sure if I'll be the one watching or the one being watched. I didn't plan on sleeping tonight. Not after last time. I spent the day pretending to be fine. I laughed at jokes in the hallway, copied homework answers, even stayed behind to help clean up after gym. But my mind never left that corner of my room, those white eyes, gone in a blink but burned into me like an afterimage that wouldn't fade. So tonight, I prepared. I turned my phone off completely, not just silent, so the glow wouldn't break my vision. The blinds were shut this time. I didn't want the streetlight's excuse to hide behind. My desk lamp stayed off. Only the city's faint heartbeat bled through the walls, distant traffic, the occasional muffled shout from the street. I sat on my bed with my knees pulled up, waiting for the dark to settle around me. At first, the room was just a room. The glow from the alarm clock seeped into the air, washing the shapes of my furniture in soft red. My breathing was slow, even. I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe it was a trick of sleep-deprived eyes. Then I saw the numbers change. 2:13. Click. It was soft like before, far away. My head snapped toward the sound, but there was nothing there, just the same shadows, stretched long across the floor. The click had come from somewhere beyond the wall, or maybe just inside it. I forced my gaze back to the clock. 2:16. Click. Closer this time. I could feel it in my skin. Not loud, but dense, as if the air itself flinched when it happened. My shoulders tensed, my breath thinned. I stared into the dark, unblinking, daring my eyes to find something. The numbers changed again. 2:19. Click. It was here. The sound came from no more than a few feet away, a sharp, precise tap, like fingernail on glass. My skin prickled, and I became aware of how heavy the air felt, thick, like humidity without the heat. My t-shirt clung to me, though I wasn't sweating. Something caught my peripheral vision, a shimmer, a change in the black. I turned my head slowly, not wanting to startle whatever might be there. My eyes drifted past the desk, past the chair, and landed on the wardrobe mirror. The reflection showed my bed, the wall behind me, and in the far corner, 2 white dots. They didn't move, they didn't blink, they just floated there, inside the glass, watching me. My heart was hammering, but my body felt locked in place. I tried to swallow and found my throat dry. I turned toward the corner. Nothing. Just darkness. I looked back at the mirror. Empty. The air pressed against my skin, clinging like damp fabric. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out the city outside. I was alone, or I wanted to believe I was. I leaned forward and picked up the pen from my nightstand. The diary lay open, page edges curling slightly in the humid stillness. I wrote the times down the left margin. 2:13, far. 2:16, closer. 2:19, here. I circled them, the ink bleeding just enough to smudge when my hand brushed the edge. My fingers were trembling. I forced them to draw a quick sketch of the room. Bed, desk, wardrobe. An arrow pointing to the corner where the eyes had been. The lines came out crooked. I wrote under it, "If it knocks 3 times again, I won't blink." The clock read 2:24 when I finally exhaled. My breathing felt too loud, like each inhale might call the sound back. I stared at the page for a long moment before setting the pen down. Something groaned deep inside the building, the kind of settling noise you don't usually notice, but tonight it felt deliberate. I stayed awake until the first blush of dawn seeped through the blinds. By then, the air felt lighter. The pressure was gone. The city outside came alive again, a siren in the distance, the rumble of a bus, footsteps on the sidewalk. When I looked at the diary again, the words 3A clicks were darker than I remembered writing them. The loops of the letters dug so deep into the paper they'd torn the fibers, leaving small holes. I didn't write them that hard. Or maybe I did, and just don't remember. Mom thinks my eyes are red from allergies. She asked me at breakfast if I'd been rubbing them too much. I told her it was probably the pollen. I didn't tell her the truth, that they burned because I barely closed them last night, that every time my lids started to drop, I forced them back open until the muscles ached. She wouldn't understand. No one would. The day was a blur. My friends said I looked like hell. One of them laughed and asked if I'd pulled an all-nighter for a game or an exam. I laughed back, but it came out thin, brittle. I kept touching the corners of my eyes, feeling the heat there, the way the skin pulled tight and dry. Every time I blinked, even during the day, I thought I saw those 2 pale points hovering somewhere in the edges of my vision. By the time night came, my decision was set. If it wanted to show itself, I wouldn't give it the chance to vanish between blinks. I wanted to see it clearly, to know what it was. Maybe that's the kind of thinking that gets you killed, or worse, but the not knowing is worse than the fear. I set the diary on the bed beside me with the pen tucked into the spine. The blinds were shut tight. The lamp was off. The air felt like it had already been in the room too long, stale and faintly sour. I sat upright with my back to the headboard, eyes locked on the far corner. I told myself I'd keep them open no matter what. Minutes passed in silence, except for the faint groan of pipes in the wall. My breathing grew louder in my own head. My eyes began to itch almost immediately, a low burn that spread outward from the edges. I fought the urge to blink, letting my vision swim slightly, but never looking away from that spot. I thought of the times I'd seen it before. First, just the eyes, then the mirror reflection. Both times it had vanished when I blinked. Tonight, that wouldn't happen. The corner darkened in a way that wasn't just shadow. Something in the blackness was different. My vision wavered, and in the center of the dark, 2 pale points emerged, sharper now. I didn't blink. I forced my eyes wider even as they began to sting. It started to take shape. Too thin. Arms too long for the size of its frame, hanging low enough that the fingertips almost brushed the floor. The outline of its hands was wrong, fingers drawn out like stretched wire, ending in nails that caught just a glint of the faintest light. The nails touched the wall. No sound at first. Then, one by one, the slowest, most deliberate taps. Not knocks, not scratches, just the barest suggestion of claws pressing and releasing, like it was testing the wall for something. 3 times. Each tap sent a small tremor through the air, as if the room itself noticed. My eyes burned hotter. Tears welled up, and I tried to keep them from spilling, but they blurred my vision until the 2 pale dots swam and streaked into vertical lines. For a moment, it looked like the thing had wept light, its eyes trailing down toward the floor. My breath had quickened without me realizing. I wanted to wipe my eyes, but I didn't dare. My gaze was locked in place. The rest of it was coming into view now, a torso bent forward as though the weight of its own limbs was dragging it down, legs folded awkwardly under a too narrow pelvis. Every inch of it seemed stretched past the point of being human. It didn't move closer. It just stood there, fingers on the wall, head tilted slightly as though listening. The longer I stared, the more I thought it could see my thoughts trying to wrap around what it was. My vision quivered at the edges. I felt the tremor in my eyelids, the involuntary twitch before a blink. I leaned sideways without breaking eye contact, dragging the diary into my lap. My fingers found the pen. The first words I wrote were tight, angular, the ink digging deep into the paper. If I sleep, it stands closer. The letters came out shaky but pressed hard enough that I could feel the indentations through the page underneath. The thing hadn't moved. Or maybe it had, and my strained eyes just couldn't register it. The nails tapped again, 3 times, but slower now, each one separated by a pause long enough to feel intentional. Like it was telling me it had all the time in the world. My eyes were screaming. The tears finally broke loose and rolled hot down my cheeks. The dots blurred again, but I kept them in sight, my head tilting to keep them in the center of my vision. My whole body felt stiff, my hands damp against the pen and the diary cover. Somewhere in the haze of my vision, the pale points flickered, not like they were going out, but as though something passed in front of them, a shadow within a shadow. My breath caught. I thought for a moment it was stepping forward, but the shape stayed tethered to the wall, nails still resting there, unmoving. I don't remember the moment my eyelids finally came down. I must have blinked because when I opened them again, the corner was empty. The only sound was my own breathing, ragged in the quiet. I looked down at the page, at the words I'd carved into it. A faint stain had bloomed along the edge, near the bottom corner where my hand had rested. Dark at first, then lighter, toward the center, like something had seeped in from outside the page. It was small, not enough to smear the ink, but the color made my stomach turn, a pale, washed-out red. I closed the diary without touching the stain. The blinds were still shut. The room was still mine. But the words I'd written stayed in my head, and the burning in my eyes hadn't gone away. I know it will come back, and next time, I'll try not to blink. I didn't notice it at first. How could I? Corners don't move. They're the most certain part of a room, the points where 2 walls meet and tell you the shape of the space you live in. But tonight, something about my room felt wrong before I even turned off the light. The day had been another blur, my eyes still raw from the night before, lids heavy but refusing to close for long. Every time they did, I saw those white points burned into the dark, hovering in the center of my mind. Mom had told me again to use eye drops, saying I looked worn down. I told her I was fine. She didn't press. When night came, I left the blinds shut tight, double-checking that no outside light could slip in. I sat on my bed, diary open beside me, the pen ready. I wasn't going to write right away. I wanted to watch, to notice every detail. The air was still, no draft from the window, no hum from the heater. It started with the far corner, the one opposite my bed, where the shadow had always been deepest. I wasn't looking directly at it when it shifted. I only realized something was different when I caught it in my peripheral vision. The angle seemed narrower. I blinked hard, thinking it was my tired eyes. But when I looked again, the corner had leaned in. Not much, just enough that the vertical line where the walls met wasn't perfectly straight anymore. I sat up straighter, my pulse creeping higher. The rest of the room was as it should be. The desk slouched under its clutter, the wardrobe standing silent, the chair still draped with my hoodie. But the far corner had changed. The shadows there felt thicker, the black not quite matching the darkness in the rest of the room. I kept staring. The walls on either side of that corner seemed to draw together, almost imperceptibly. It reminded me of pulling 2 edges of a tent flap closer. The space between them shrank, not in a way I could measure with a ruler, but in the way it made the air feel heavier, tighter. I reached for the diary without looking away, dragging it into my lap. My pen scratched across the page. Walls breathing? I underlined it twice. The sound of the nib against paper felt too loud in the stillness. A faint click sounded, not the sharp taps from before, but the dull plastic pop of the desk lamp's switch. I turned my head just enough to see the lamp. It was off, but the switch had moved down a fraction, as if touched. My skin prickled. I wrote again, objects shifting. When I looked back, the corner had drawn in closer. The change was subtle, but now I could see the baseboards no longer lined up evenly. My breath came slower, heavier. I felt the strange urge to lean forward, as though closing the distance myself would prove it wasn't happening. A frame on the shelf above my desk rattled softly, tilting until it pointed almost directly at the shadowed corner. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I put the pen down and gripped the edge of the diary with damp fingers. Then the music started. Just a low, muffled hum from my old Bluetooth speaker on the desk, the one I hadn't turned on. A single note, deep and steady, vibrating through the room. I stood quickly, the bed frame creaking under my weight. The sound cut off the moment I took a step toward the desk. The corner pulsed. I don't know how else to describe it. The angle shifted minutely, the black inside it seeming to swell and then pull back. It was like watching something inhale. I backed up until my calves hit the bed. The urge to run was tangled with a stronger need to keep watching. The diary was still open on the bed, the last words staring up at me. Walls breathing? I sat down again, slower this time, eyes never leaving the corner. My heart thudded against my ribs in an unsteady rhythm. I picked up the pen and wrote, "If I step into the corner, it'll step out." The moment the ink dried, something in the darkness shifted. Not the corner itself this time, but the air in front of it. The space seemed to ripple, like heat rising off asphalt. I thought about what I'd just written. The idea of crossing the room pulled at me, not with curiosity exactly, but with a kind of dare. The corner felt aware now, like it was waiting for me to make the first move. The walls on either side seemed to lean in another fraction. My breathing felt shallow, my shoulders locked. I could hear the faintest sound, not scratching, not tapping, but a slow drag, like a fingertip running down the inside of the wall. The light from the alarm clock barely reached that far, but it caught something in the dark, a glint, a flash, and then gone. My grip tightened on the pen. I wrote the time in the margin, 2:26. The air grew colder, not the sharp chill of an open window, but the deep sinking cold that makes your bones ache. My eyes watered, but I didn't blink. Then, without a sound, the corner was normal again, perfectly straight, baseboards lined up, angles exact. The sudden normalcy made my stomach twist harder than the distortion had. I stared for another 5 minutes, waiting for it to change again. It didn't. The hum of the refrigerator seeped back through the wall, faint but grounding. My breathing slowed. When I finally closed the diary, I noticed a mark on the lower edge of the page, a small, dark smudge, almost round, almost like the faint imprint of 2 dots side by side. Evan laughed when I told him. I'd picked my words carefully, trying to make it sound like a weird dream instead of something I'd actually seen, but the moment I mentioned the corner moving, his face twisted into a smirk. He tapped his phone, said, "Sounds like sleep paralysis," and went back to whatever video he was watching. I didn't bother pushing it. It's easier when they think you're joking. Mom isn't any better. I hinted that strange things kept happening in my room at night. She said I'd been spending too much time alone, that my mind was inventing shadows. She doesn't know that shadows don't invent themselves. All day, their disbelief followed me like a shadow of its own. Every time I replayed last night, the breathing walls, the corner narrowing like it wanted to swallow me, I thought about how easy it would be for someone else to dismiss it. That's what makes this worse. Not the thing itself, but the way it's invisible to everyone else. Tonight, I decided to get proof. I dug an old cassette recorder out of my desk drawer. It belonged to my dad once. The metal casing is scratched, the buttons stiff. I pressed play just to hear the whir of the reels. The sound was steady, mechanical, a comfort in a way. I popped in a blank tape, wound it forward and back to make sure it wouldn't stick, then set it on my desk facing the far corner. From 2:10 to 2:30, I sat on my bed and kept my eyes open. The blinds were closed, the room dim except for the clock's red glow. I wrote in the diary as I waited, proof attempt, 2:10 start. The pen felt heavier with each word. At 2:13, the first click came. Faint, but there, captured on tape, I hoped. At 2:16, the second click, closer. The air pressed against my skin the way it always does before something happens. At 2:19, the third click, sharp and near enough that I felt it in my teeth. I didn't move. I just kept writing. Captured all three. Review later. The pressure in the room didn't lift. My breath stayed shallow. I felt the hair on my arms rise. At 2:21, a knock came at the door. Mom's voice, muffled but clear. "You're still awake?" I froze. The words were right. The tone was almost right. But there was something in the rhythm that didn't belong. Like each syllable had been measured too carefully. I didn't answer. The knock didn't come again. When the clock hit 2:30, I stopped the recorder. My fingers trembled as I pressed rewind. The reel spun, the faint hiss of tape filling the silence. I pressed play. The first click came exactly where it should, soft but distinct. The second followed, sharper. The third was loud enough to make me flinch, even though I'd been expecting it. Then, nothing. No knock, no voice, just the hiss of tape until it stopped. I stared at the recorder. My own breathing sounded loud in the room. The lack of that voice on the tape should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It made it worse. In the diary, I wrote, "If no one believes me, I'll leave a note." I pressed the pen so hard into the paper that the words indented through the next 2 pages. When I put the pen down, I noticed a smear on the edge of the page, darker than ink, faintly red under the clock's glow. I rubbed it with my thumb. It didn't come off. The city outside was quiet for once. No sirens, no footsteps in the hall. I could hear the old building creak, the kind of sound that usually fades into the background. Tonight, each groan felt like something shifting in the dark. I set the recorder on the nightstand, still within reach, and left the diary open. If it happens again, I want to be ready, to write, to listen, to prove to myself I'm not imagining it. Because if no one else can see it, then it's up to me. And if I disappear, at least these pages will know the truth. I don't remember writing it. The words are there, in the margin of the previous page. Stay awake, repeated twice, the dots between the words spaced unevenly, the strokes thin and spidery, the downward lines pressed deep enough to bruise the paper. My own handwriting curves tighter, loops shorter. This script leans at an unnatural angle, as if the hand that formed it wasn't made for writing. I turn the page over in my lap, fingers brushing the rough indentations on the back where the pen tore into the fibers. The pressure in those strokes feels deliberate, not frantic. It's the kind of writing you make when you want someone to see it. I try to remember the moment I could have done it, maybe half asleep, maybe in one of those waking dreams where your body moves without you. But there's nothing. No flicker of memory. It's as if the words appeared between blinks. Tonight, I decide, I won't sleep at all, not even for a moment. The blinds are shut so tight that no light leaks through. My desk lamp is unplugged. The air in my room is motionless, heavy, like it's been sealed here for days. I sit upright on the bed, diary open on my lap, pen poised above a blank page already dated. The faint red glow of the alarm clock paints a thin horizon line along the edges of my desk, my chair, the wardrobe. Every object seems sharper than usual, as though the darkness has given them teeth. The sound of the cassette recorder on the nightstand is constant, the reels turning slow, the faint hiss of magnetic tape sliding past the playback head. I imagine it as a second pair of eyes, recording for me, catching what I might miss. The thought doesn't comfort me. Minutes stretch, my shoulders ache from holding still. The skin beneath my eyes feels tight and hot, my vision edged with a dull throb from forcing my lids open. I keep checking the corners of the room, not just the farthest one, but all four, in slow sweeps of my gaze. I try to listen past my own breathing. 2:19. The sound comes, but not from where I expect. Click, click, click. It's inside the wardrobe. The noise isn't muffled. It's sharp, precise, as if there's no fabric between the sound and my ears. Stare at the wardrobe doors, my fingers tightening around the pen. The brass handles glint faintly, curved like small, waiting smiles. The gap between the doors is blacker than the space around it, a seam in the room's skin. I set the diary aside, the pen rolling to rest against my thigh. My feet touch the floor. The boards are cold enough to sting, the chill spreading up my shins. The recorder's whir feels louder now, like it's reacting to the clicks. Step by step, I move toward the wardrobe. Each creak from the floorboard sends a tight pulse through my chest. The handles are cold at first, then seem to warm under my grip, as if skin presses back from the other side. My knuckles whiten around the metal. I pull the doors open. The smell hits me first, a dry, woody scent laced with something faintly metallic, sharp like the air before a storm. My shirts and jackets hang in a cramped row, swaying just slightly, though the air in the room is still. The sound of hangers clicking softly against the metal rod is too regular to be random. Then I see them. 2 white eyes, lower than I expected, just at the height of my waist. They shine without glowing, reflecting no light, yet too pale to be swallowed by the blackness behind them. The shape connected to them steps forward just enough for the faint light to touch it. The shoulders are narrow, the torso thin as if it's been starved down to its framework. The arms hang too long, the elbows low, the fingers extending into pale lengths, tipped with dull, thick nails. One hand rests against the inside edge of the wardrobe door. The other hovers near my leg, just far enough that I can feel the cold radiating from it. My breath catches. The room's air feels like it's tightening around me, squeezing from every direction. Instinct throws me backward. My heel catches the rug and I go down hard, palms slapping the floor. A sharp sting blooms across my right hand where the skin splits, warm wetness spreading into my lifeline. I scramble to my feet, stumbling back to the bed. The diary lies open, and before I can think about it, I'm sitting, pen in hand, writing furiously. If I disappear, this is entry number 14. When I reach the words, entry number 14, something in my grip changes. My wrist turns slightly, the pressure of the pen shifts, and the letters start to stretch unnaturally. The spacing between words grows uneven, the downward strokes carve deeper, cutting through the top page into the one beneath. It's my hand, but it isn't moving under my control. I drop the pen. My palm throbs, leaving faint smudges of red on the paper. The air in the room has gone utterly silent. Even the recorder seems to hesitate, its reels slowing imperceptibly. My fingers twitch, then curl around the pen again, lifting it to the center of the page. The strokes are violent now, each line gouging the paper's surface until fibers lift and tear. Stay awake. The letters dominate half the page, jagged and uneven, their edges fraying from the force. The smell of torn paper mixes with the faint iron tang of my own blood. The words seem to pulse under the clock's red light, like they've been burned into the page instead of written. In the lower margin, my hand moves again, smaller now, the tip of the pen scratching in tight, cramped letters. It learned to write. I stare at the words until my vision blurs. The cut on my palm leaves another smear across the bottom corner of the page, darker than the first. The drop spreads slowly, then slips off the edge, landing silently on the floorboards. I close the diary hard, the pages slapping together. My breath comes in sharp bursts, loud in the stillness. My eyes flick to the wardrobe. The doors are shut again, perfectly aligned, no sign of the thing that stood there moments ago. Then I notice the blood. It's seeping through the closed diary, a thin line tracing down the edge and over the cover, falling in slow drops that leave a faint trail across the rug. The trail runs toward the far corner of the room, and there, just at the threshold where the walls meet, are 2 white eyes, waiting.